Welcome back to Talk of the Town. I'm Steve Noxon, and joining me now on the phone is State Senator Rob Sampson. Senator Sampson, how have you been?
I am excellent, Steve. Good morning. I was enjoying your monologue today. Great job.
Well, they make it easy sometimes. Sometimes they make it even too easy sometimes.
There is no shortage of things to talk about, that's for
sure. First thing I want to talk with you about, and hopefully we'll get to a couple of other topics with you as well, but I want to get into this thing about the governor's executive powers. I talked a little bit about this yesterday, and it's just shocking to me that this many months later, 10 to 12 months after he first gained these executive powers, there is no desire, it seems, to get back to our usual and I think desired form of governance here in Connecticut.
Right. Well, I mean, there's some desire on the part of a few people, including myself, and it sounds like you. The biggest issue I have with it is the lack of consistency more than anything. I mean, obviously, I don't enjoy having the governor with such tremendous authoritarian type power in our state. But the biggest issue is that they just can't seem to keep their story straight. On one day, the virus is so dangerous that we have to shut things down and the governor must run the state by executive order. And the next day, the legislature has got to meet and do all of this business, and we're going to come up with all this new technology to do so. Well, if that's true, and you can actually run the legislature and the state government via all of this new technology, then why do you need to extend the governor's powers further? It doesn't make any sense. They want to have it both ways, and they've been successful at doing that.
Well, and the comments by people like House Speaker Matt Ritter and Senate Majority Leader Martin Looney, that, there's just not enough time to come together and negotiate and debate these things. A, you've had a year. B, do you really need to negotiate all that much with the governor? You're all of the same party, and I think pretty much all on the same page with these things. And you have majorities in both the House and Senate. What would take so long to just quickly look at the things that the governor has issued, all the mandates and everything else, bring them up for a vote, and there you go. You've now done your job as legislators.
Right. Well, you've hit the nail on the head. They don't want to vote on the majority of these things. They want to pick and choose the things that the legislative membership is going to be responsible for. They love the idea that the governor is carrying all the heavy load and making the very tough decisions, and they get to go into session when they feel like they put forward their agenda item bills. The responsibility of the heavy lifting of running in the state government, they can have a hands-off approach to and let the governor deal with that. And that's exactly what the Democrats in the legislature have been doing ever since COVID began. And now they are in overdrive because I think we're going to see more bills and more legislation pass this cycle than we have even before COVID, because we do have this new era of Zoom meetings. I'm very upset about the legislative rules, by the way, Steve, which they've adopted. The legislative rules made several significant changes. The number one biggest one is that they are now going to allow the legislature to meet via the internet, via Zoom meetings for public hearings and for committee meetings where we're actually casting votes. And my issue with that is that many people are going to be cut out of the process. Forget the fact that the People's House is referred to as such because of the ability for citizens to come and speak with their representatives in person, to make their voices heard, to make their presence known, and sometimes in a big way. I mean, last year we had maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people show up to express their dissatisfaction with the removal of the religious exemption for vaccines. Whether you agree or disagree on that issue, you recognize the importance of how people need to be able to come and put pressure on the legislature to let them representatives know how they feel on issues. This is going to cut out so many different people who don't have the technology, older people who are not computer literate, people who live in urban environments where they don't have access to a computer. I mean, do their rights not matter to the majority party?
I'm just amazed that, even a year later that we're able to have people in grocery stores and big box stores, and we've got all these mass mandates and stuff in place. But those chambers are rather large. You mean to tell me there's no way they can figure out a way to get people in person into those chambers safely?
Yeah, it's positively ridiculous. I mean, they make up the rules as they go. We were sworn into office on the 6th of January, and they made us do it outside. Oh, COVID, it's so bad. We have to go outside and sit in the freezing cold and do this. A week later, not even a week, I think, we were back in the actual building voting on judges because their terms are about to expire. I'm like, what, is the situation suddenly different? They just want to have it their way every day. And that hypocrisy is what is so frustrating to watch. And because they're using it to move their agenda and silence the public and the opposition any way possible.
And I just think it's amazing to watch because it all seems just like political theater to me at this point. All of these things seem to be geared toward how it looks, how it's going to play in the media. It just there's all these games that I see being played. And as you say, they're just changing the rules up to make whatever they want to have happen to make some sort of points through the media.
Right. Yeah, no, and I'm scared for the future of this state. I'm scared for the future of this country. Democrats, they did not win by huge margins. They won the presidency. They've taken over the U.S. Senate. They did pick up seats in the state of Connecticut, but I think everyone recognizes that the reason for that was the impact of the presidential election. And had that not been on the ticket at the same time, Republicans probably would have made up ground in the Connecticut legislature. But the majority party is acting as if they have a tremendous mandate. And worse than that, they are acting as if they now have a mandate to essentially crush any opposition or any opposing voice. And they're even painting conservatives as if we are some kind of terrorists or our speech is somehow unfriendly to the peace of the future. It's complete madness. And I'm hopeful that somebody in the press wakes up and realizes, even if they disagree with the conservative viewpoint, that our American system requires that people have freedom of speech.
Well, I've just been disturbed by a lot of the commentary that I've been seeing about how, even from elected officials saying that we need to figure out a way to deprogram these Republicans. We need to, basically shun them from working in any sort of businesses and get them out of the media and shut down their websites and take them off of platforms and deplatforming them here and there and everywhere. I mean, I've never seen anything like this before. It's just accepted by the media, by the mainstream media, that this is okay to be talking this way.
It's completely crazy. Steve, I shared an article on social media this morning that it's something I just found out. And keep in mind, I am the Republican ranking member, the most important Republican senator on the Government Administration and Elections Committee. And I just found this out today, that the Secretary of State hired a person back in the fall before the November election whose job was to track disinformation, they call it, about voting and election fraud on social media. And for what purpose? I still don't know the answer to that, but I can promise you and your listeners I'm going to do my best to find out. But they're using taxpayer money to track the voices of people concerned about election fraud online, because I think that they're concerned that the information will spread. And I'm not endorsing the notion that the national election was stolen. The fact is, we don't know. We will never know, because most of that information has never been made public, and we've never had a proper audit of elections across the country. But that's exactly what they're trying to prevent. They're trying to prevent any conversation on that subject.
Oh, well, and you've got the big tech involved in this, with them banning any videos on YouTube talking about voter fraud. And what I find to be just absolutely hypocritical about this in the extreme is all we've heard for the last 4 years is that there was massive voter fraud led to Trump being elected. And they had a 2.5-year plus investigation into Russian collusion, which showed nothing. And then they followed up with all other kinds of accusations. You got Hillary Clinton's out there still saying that Donald Trump was on the phone with Vladimir Putin the day before the riots or the day of the riots in Washington, D.C., and wants an investigation into that. And it's like, what is going on right now in this country We're just having a conversation about something that we know existed and we know exists because people are getting arrested all over the country for engaging in voter fraud. Why don't we want to have this conversation? What's wrong with this conversation now when after the last 4 years, that's all we heard?
Yes, it's actually shocking to me that there is a narrative that exists in our society that anyone that mentions voter fraud must be cuckoo, and that they're obviously a Trump loyalist and they can't be trusted, and they're just willing to make up things. I mean, it's just shocking to me that that's the way they are trying to dismiss a genuine and real issue, a very real issue, even here in our state. What's so funny is that my ex-opponent, the gentleman that I defeated to become a state representative a little over 10 years ago, Corky Mazurek, actually challenged me on Facebook that I keep talking about voter fraud. And, I dropped a mountain of information on him, documented cases, including a Democrat state representative who was arrested on 17 counts of voter fraud from Bridgeport 5 or 6 years ago, and countless other examples. I pointed out a video of the state senator that I serve with from Bridgeport from just last year, who was the only person, by the way, to vote against the expansion of absentee voting for COVID-19. And the reason why, he said in his own words that voter fraud is such a real thing in Bridgeport. When he was first ran for office, he noticed there were 65 votes coming from one individual address. And just on a whim, he took a drive by to see what was there, expecting to find an apartment building, and he found a vacant lot. This is coming from one of my Democrat counterparts in the state Senate. The idea that voter fraud does not exist is a ridiculous argument. The facts do not bear that out. And it's so important that we address this issue and we treat it like it's a real thing. We live in this crazy world, Steve, where it seems like it's all or nothing for everyone. You have to be absolutely 100% pro-Trump and the election nationally was stolen, or you are somebody who despises Trump in every way, shape, and form, and any mention of voter fraud is craziness. Well, the truth is probably somewhere very much in the middle of that. Voter fraud is real. Trump is right a lot of the time. He's wrong some of the time. And if people could start to look at the world that way and be a little more objective and critical thinking about the things that happen, I think we'd get along a lot better.
Well, I've always just been amazed, and my position on this is, look, we're probably never going to clean this system up because the winners never want to investigate voter fraud allegations because, hey, they won. And then, it just continues. And we've seen it here in the state of Connecticut, like you say. But when President Trump was elected, the first thing he did, or one of the first things he did, was to create a panel to investigate voter fraud across the country. Like, this is the first time I've ever seen the person who won want to investigate this and clean this system up. Right. And our own Secretary of State refused to participate. Now, what I found really incredible about it is you could buy all of the voter data that this panel was looking for from the state of Connecticut at the time for $600. They would sell it to you for whatever purpose you might have. But they wouldn't give it to the federal government when they were doing an investigation into voter fraud because the Secretary of State just said, I don't think voter fraud exists. I mean, that's just amazing to me. That why wouldn't you want to investigate it and find out if it's happening? Because we know it's happening. People are getting arrested, like I said, all the time over these things.
Right. Well, that was unity, Steve. That's what you were witnessing.
Yeah.
No matter how you slice it, I have respect for my colleagues in both parties, and that includes our Secretary of State. But there is no question she has acted as a complete partisan in every way. She tried to put roadblocks in the way of the President of the United States during his voter fraud investigation, as you mentioned, and she's been putting roadblocks in the way of Republicans, including myself, who have been trying to uncover election fraud and repair a broken system in our state. But I'll tell you that the biggest issue really is that Republicans across the country and here in Connecticut failed big time. We really did fail in a huge way this past year when all of these Democratic administrations from across the country decided that they wanted to implement mail-in voting. Mail-in voting is the worst possible prescription to have a legitimate election. You just cannot have a legitimate election when you're sending out thousands and thousands of ballots to people in a way where you have no idea whether they will be returned, filled out by whom, and returned. And the idea that you're going to track down and catch people who commit fraud using that system is also a farce, because the system is brilliantly devised to prevent you from being able to catch people.
Right.
And we have to stop it. And it is my number one focus. It was my number one focus over the summer to prevent that from happening. And sadly, when I did my best in the state Senate to prevent the mass mailing during the national election, we failed on a party line vote to prevent that from happening. But I'm going to make it my complete and utter focus this legislative session to prevent that from becoming a reality in the future. And if there's one issue that I really want to get the public ginned up about and helping me prevent, it's that.
Well, I mean, it's just, even the New York Times prior to this has written reports and had studies that show that vote by mail is most susceptible to voter fraud more than any other type of voting. States like Oregon that have 100% vote by mail, they don't even look into whether there's any voter fraud so that they can say we have no evidence. Well, you have no evidence because you've never investigated it. Outside groups have investigated it and discovered massive amounts of voter fraud. But because the state doesn't want to look into it, the state is then free to say there is no fraud because we haven't discovered any evidence of fraud. Well, it's real simple to avoid evidence of fraud if you don't look for it.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, no, the mail-in system is corrupt in a bunch of different ways, but the number one way is that it's unnecessary. I was more than happy to sign on with the rest of my colleagues in both parties to say, look, COVID-19 is a real thing, and we should allow people to vote by absentee as a result. But we have an existing system. It's a simple system, too. It's a mere phone call or going online to ask for a ballot application, which you complete, and they will send you a ballot. The same way anyone else who needs an absentee ballot for the other purposes and other illnesses does. The Democrats just saw an opportunity, and they took it. And that opportunity was to just send thousands and thousands of ballots out there, knowing full well that our voter rolls in Connecticut are a disgrace. They're unbelievable. The number of people that contacted me who had received numerous ballot applications at their home address that don't belong to them, or ones in multiple names that do belong to them. I had people that get them in their married name and their maiden name, ones for their children who moved out of state a decade ago, for deceased people, for the dog. I mean, it's just unbelievable that would be an acceptable policy that they're willing to defend, by the way.
Yeah, no, it really is crazy. And again, I think the whole idea that we don't want to investigate this and to say that this is all about Trump derangement is I think, again, so disingenuous as to almost be an insult to my intelligence, because I've been talking about this for 20 years. This is a problem that was here long before Trump and will be around long after Trump. And every single person I've debated about this has said, well, it's not a big deal. Maybe it happens here and there and it's not a big deal. Again, you don't know that because you refuse to look into it.
Right. And the Secretary of State has abused her power. She's given a certain amount of authority in our laws to determine, or I don't know what the word might be, to make her own opinion of what the law actually says.
Oh yeah. She was able to interpret it. Yeah.
Yeah, interpret. That's the word I was looking for. To interpret what the law is on certain things, and she has just gone way, way beyond the pale. The way the absentee ballot applications were produced, the things she chose to bold, the way things were phrased were very misleading and not the intent of the legislature. This year they're going to come back and they're going to try and make the law so that incarcerated persons will be eligible to vote also. And you can ask yourself why they want to do that.
Yeah, no, it's pretty obvious what they're doing here, and it's really, I think it's a disservice to the citizens of the state and of the country to not even take this issue seriously and just allow it to continue to get worse and worse and worse. And again, I remember having a conversation with someone about this again well before Trump was even considering a run for office, saying that even here in the state of Connecticut, I think I don't remember where it was, but there was one place that reported a 110% turnout on election day. And I mentioned this to somebody, and I said, what does that tell you? He goes, well, that just means that people were really excited to go out there and vote. I said, that's mathematically ignorant. You can't have 110% of a population.
Right, but it did happen in several jurisdictions across the country, no question about it. Yeah, I mean, Steve, let me tell you how the conversation goes in the GAE, the Government Administration and Elections Committee, when I'm dealing with my Democratic colleagues or the Secretary of State. They come to me and they say, we want to expand access to voting. And sometimes that's a legitimate expansion of access to voting, although I might not agree with it. Like they want 16-year-olds to vote. They want criminals to vote. Things like that. I don't want to see those changes, but here they are saying they want to increase access to voting. I'm like, well, okay, let's have a conversation about access to voting, but at the same time, can we have a conversation about maintaining the integrity of the process? And the answer is always no. The Secretary of State tried to eliminate something called checkers. Checkers are the people that actually are appointed by the political parties to pay attention to what's going on in the polls to make sure that if any funny business is going on, they can speak up. She wants to eliminate the ability for checkers to exist. Voter identification. I have been harping for a decade about how we need an actual voter ID law in the state of Connecticut that requires a photo identification. And absolutely not. And of course, their argument is always, that's those terrible Republicans who are trying to suppress the vote of black and brown people. That's the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard in my life. It's also insulting. I think that people of all races have the ability to obtain a photo identification. In fact, you need a photo identification to do almost everything that there is in life these days. The argument that you can't have one to do something as important as casting your vote is ridiculous, and they know it. But that's the argument they make.
Well, talk about irony. They set these big fences up around the Capitol area and around the mall, and you have to show an ID to get in, but you don't have to show an ID to vote. It's just ironic, I guess is the best word. Now, you've been speaking out about this.
Steve, come on.
What?
Yeah, I said fences don't work.
No, of course not. But you've been speaking out about this, and you've received some pushback, and actually some people were kind of trying to slander you, I would say, recently. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, well, a few weeks ago, I had actually posted on social media about something else, another issue we haven't touched on, but it is a huge concern, and that is the crime wave that is sweeping our state.
Oh, right. That was
the massive rise in car thefts in particularly, but lots of different types of crime, and particularly among juveniles. And these crimes are a result of a whole series of policies that have passed over the last decade. Everything from the early release program for violent felons that lets prisoners out of prison early, the Raise the Age program, which essentially increased the age at which someone might be considered a minor. Some things about the way judges have to handle certain types of cases, how motor vehicle thefts are handled in our court system. And, of course, the most recent thing, which was the police accountability bill, which undermines law enforcement in a big way. These things have all led to the increase in crime that's happening on all different levels. A tremendous number of violent crimes are occurring compared to just a few years ago. The number of murders in our major cities are double what they were just a couple of years ago. And minor juvenile crime is just off the chart. And it's a result of these policies. So I posted about this. And the one thing that I noted was an article written by the CT News Junkie that said that the leadership of the Judiciary Committee in the legislature is refusing to have a conversation about changes to the police bill. And I said in my post that I wanted to create public pressure to force them to have a conversation about this issue. And would you know it? I was accused of inciting violence because I want to force a conversation. The two most powerful Democrats in the state Senate Martin Looney and Bob Duff, the president of the Senate, and his sidekick, came out and made a statement basically saying I was inciting violence and hatred and fear-mongering, et cetera, because I want to have a conversation about a bill that is actually causing problems.
Do you ever just get a little frustrated with the fact that people will throw these specious allegations out just without any concern at all about what they may be doing to someone's reputation, what they may be doing to someone's integrity, what they're actually saying here? I mean, because I've been struck over the last couple of weeks and months about the language that people have been using to describe people they disagree with and things that they disagree with. I mean, now you've got people they're vetting National Guard members because they may have not voted for Joe Biden. I mean, that's
because they're white.
Well, yeah. But
That's the reason why, Steve. It's because they are white.
It's just
they're pointing out that white people are the danger to the future of our country. And look, I mean, people need to understand that racism works in all different directions and affects all different people. And that is nothing different than pointing out any other person's race. And it has to stop. We need to recognize that we're all Americans and that, the color of our skin doesn't matter. I mean, we just had Martin Luther King Day. The point of Martin Luther King's existence on this planet and his rise in American political, the experience of America was the fact that he wanted people to be judged by their character, not the color of their skin. A principle found in the founding documents of this country, all men are created equal. That is what we have been trying to achieve since the very beginning. And all of this conversation that divides us based on race and a host of other identity politics issues is what's destroying and tearing apart the fabric of this country. And it's all being used by the left for political gain. They are dividing and conquering. They are dividing people to groups and pitting them against each other for politics. And if you refuse to play that game, they just call you names and smear you.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to watch all these calls for unity. At the same time, they're calling out Republicans as being labeled as domestic terrorists and need to be deprogrammed. That's not how you win people over to your side. And the same, going back to what we were talking about, whether or not there was fraud in this recent election, I think is a moot point because we know there was fraud. There's always fraud. Was it enough to change the actual outcome of the election? I don't know. But you know what? There's 74 million people out there that wanted to see somebody do an investigation into this. And after the last presidential election, we saw 2.5 years of investigation into a bogus claim, and people were fully in support of that. And then to take this issue this time and just sweep it under the rug and tell anybody who even thinks that there was a problem there that they're a conspiracy theorist and a domestic terrorist and they need to be banned from polite society for the rest of time, I think is just it's idiotic because it does not address the concerns of those people, and you're not going to get them. You're not going to change their minds, make them happier just by telling them to go away, sit down, and shut up.
Yeah, the ends justifies the means with the left in this country, and they will use whatever technique or tactic to achieve that goal. It doesn't matter. And I think they see an opening. I think they feel like they control everything now. They control the levers of government, the levers of power, the news media, education, entertainment. And as a result, I think that they see an opportunity, an opening to really, crush conservative viewpoints, American ideology of freedom and opportunity, and replace it with big government socialism. And they're trying with every effort that they can. And I just hope people come to their senses. It's the Republican Party that was founded on the concept that identity politics is wrong and that every individual has equal rights. We are the Civil Rights Party. It's the reason why I became a Republican to begin with. If people understood our history, if they understood the founding documents in the way they were conceived, if they understood the history of the Civil War and everything we've been through to get to the free America that we enjoy today, they'd have a different viewpoint. But that's all being erased by the left because they want to undermine our history and our entire concept of America and replace it with something else.
Yeah, it's just been fascinating to watch. And again, it goes back to what we started talking about here, and this is the governor's emergency powers. They're playing games with the how the government is run, and they don't seem to have a problem whatsoever with having one person having all of the power to do whatever he wants to do, and it flies in the face of the type of representative government we are supposed to be living under. And I'm just really frustrated by the fact that you have people like Martin Looney, who's been there for 40 years plus, sitting back and saying, no, that's fine. This is cool. I like the way this is going. I don't have to take responsibility for anything, yet I've got all the power to do whatever I want to do. It boggles my mind.
You can be certain that they'd be clamoring if we had a Republican governor in the state, much the same as the Democrats across the country clamored when we had a Republican president. The hypocrisy is staggering. I mean, at the state capitol today, you have National Guard here in Connecticut also carrying around AR-15s. I mean, excuse me. I mean, the Democrats called these people to the Capitol to protect them. These are the same folks that say there's no reason to have an AR-15. You know? It's like their hypocrisy just never ends.
Yeah, no bounds. Absolutely no bounds.
It's a scary image, what is going on in Washington today with the amount of military presence that there is. It just reminds me of dictatorships all across the world. And I'm not calling Biden dictator. It's just like, this is like shocking to me that we need to protect our newly elected president with all of this military force. That shouldn't happen. And it should definitely not happen in this country. And it makes you wonder what choices caused that to happen. And I certainly don't think it is a threat, any viable or real threat from Trump supporters. Trump supporters are not violent people. They are people that love this country and the rule of law. They're just the exact opposite of people that would be engaged in that kind of thing.
Well, and I think it's a complete insult to every military person who's ever served to have these people calling out and demanding that these National Guard people are vetted, as if the oath that they took when they joined the service isn't of any value at all, and that they're smearing an entire group of people simply because they may have different political beliefs. So I just find it disgusting, and it's no way to unify a country that's as divided as we are today. Well, Senator Sampson, I always appreciate having you on. I always enjoy our conversation, sir. And I want to thank you very much for your time, and good luck in this legislative session if you ever get to have your voice heard.
I appreciate the opportunity, Steve, and I am at your service anytime. And God bless our country, and let's hope that the future is still bright regardless of who's in the White House.